Recently, President Barack Obama's approval rating has been sliding a little bit. President Obama still has a relatively high average approval rating, a condition all presidents experience. Most of the reason for the lower approval ratings for Obama are because Americans are upset that he hasn't fixed the many problems left by incompetent and war criminal George Bush, and the GOP majority for 6 years, and George Bush's criminally incompetent staff, like Dick Cheney's top advisor, Scooter Libby, or Louis Libby, who was sentenced to prison for perjury. Of course, war criminal George Bush commuted his sentence. Americans are very unhappy about being committed in Iraq. President Barack Obama needs to remove U.S. troops from Iraq immediately to regain the trust of the American people. Another major problem left by incompetent and war criminal George Bush is the failure to have apprehended Osama bin Laden, who attacked us on 9/11 with a handful of Saudi Arabian terrorists. Of course, moron George Bush tried to invade another country that had nothing to do with it, taking our eye off the ball and committing 150,000 troops, armored brigades, and equipment, as well as the lives given up for this horribly stupid cause that George Bush got us into. George Bush continued to try and connect Iraq and Saddam Hussein with the 9/11 incident, even though from the very outset there was no connection at all.
Fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
The main reason we went into Iraq at the time was we thought he had weapons of mass destruction. It turns out he didn't. What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
And even though George Bush knew that, he decided to lie to America and continue on that evil path. He's an evildoer, and the focus on Afghanistan needs to be shifted dramatically. Americans are very unhappy with the results. George Bush, of course, caused it by putting 150,000 troops and armor into Iraq, rather than actually going after the terrorists who attacked us on 9/11. A really stupid decision, and one that's murderous and criminal, having murdered 1.3 million innocent Iraqis in doing it, yet not capturing the person who attacked us. This is the equivalent of being attacked by Saudi Arabia and then in response attacking a different country, like Iraq, for instance. Since Bush misdirected our forces in the very beginning after having been attacked by Saudi Arabian terrorists, it's a little late to beef up those resources and go after him now. It's like having your supermarket robbed by several thieves and then waiting 8 years to go after them, after having misdirected all of your police resources to the wrong place, like Iraq, for instance. To achieve results in Afghanistan, or anywhere where terrorists may be localized, it's essential to have small unit task forces, rather than a big bulky army that sits at a stationary base and has very limited mobility. What you want is very small strike units that are highly mobile, highly speedy, as well as very lethal. That's the way to actually hunt terrorists, not by deploying a giant force and having them wait around in the desert to be attacked by rockets and other forms of destructive IEDs. The small unit forces can be intelligence-based, gathering intelligence on very specific targets and moving very agilely to attack those specific targets and neutralize all threats. Terrorists aren't terribly sedentary, so thinking that they'll hang out on a mountainside for 8 years is pretty stupid. What we need to do is focus on their mobile targets and apprehend and remove them, with lethal force if necessary. Fast, mobile, and lethal units can be highly effective, as we've seen in the past in Vietnam. The United States Navy SEALs were the most effective commando force and the most lethal force in Vietnam for a ground warfare unit. They were also the most highly decorated commando warfare unit in Vietnam. Small unit task forces are very lethal. They can be inserted very quickly in a range of situations and environments, maritime or land-based. Small units are also more highly trained and can exert more lethal force. The flexibility and agility that a very small, fast-moving lethal unit has is unbelievable. They can take out objectives very easily and very quickly, encountering little resistance because they creep in and creep out. We have to recognize that the terrorists that attacked us aren't exactly morons. They devised a plan and carried it out very effectively and very lethally. They were able to strike 3 of the 4 targets with extreme precision, taking out 2 targets at one location, and a 3rd target was a military target, the Pentagon, which they were actually able to hit as well, taking out the Navy wing of the 5-sided structural building that represents the intelligence of the United States military and our security. Well, the Commander-in-Chief, George Bush, sat in a classroom reading My Pet Goat. The 4th aircraft never reached its objective or target, since the passengers on the aircraft organized into a small unit task force, moving very quickly and charging the cabin, and apprehending the pilots at the helm, 2 Saudi Arabian terrorists, not Iraqis. So we urge President Barack Obama, whom we all voted for, to beef up special forces, small unit task forces, units that specialize in high mobility and high lethality. It is good that President Barack Obama has increased funding for these special units, for the first time in many years, since President Bill Clinton increased it. George Bush actually decreased it, leaving us open and exposed to very simple threats and leaving us unresponsive to these threats. It's important that the new response to anti-terrorist tactics take shape and form in small units, highly mobile and highly lethal units that specialize in locating and neutralizing very specific threats, like the 19 Saudi Arabian hijackers who attacked us on 9/11. Instead, Bush went into Iraq, utilizing most of our military resources and misdirecting it to an ineffective plan and an unsuccessful attempt to catch the person who attacked us. In order for President Barack Obama to meet with the American citizens' approval, he needs to be effective, and Afghanistan is a pretty good proving ground. The American people want us to leave Afghanistan immediately because of the great expenditure and the enormous lack of results achieved by the Bush administration over a period of over 7 years. The American people want and expect results from the leaders at the very top. The American people expect a bang for their buck. They don't expect that we'll misdirect gigantic resources like our United States military and come up empty-handed.
Mr. President, in your speeches now you rarely talk or mention Osama bin Laden. Why is that?
He is, so I don't know where he is. Nor, I just don't spend that much time on him.
It's much more effective to have small, well-trained units that can identify targets in advance and stop them from attacking our country and our citizens. President Barack Obama has realized this and increased the funding for these small units. We hope that they're used wisely and inserted properly to create an anti-threat for America, providing a net of security, establishing points of intelligence, and keeping a record of who is where, and apprehending them before they actually fly their planes into our buildings. Like George Bush let happen, but then again he was occupied, well, reading My Pet Goat.